Hey guys, it's Rebecca here again. Today I'm going to talk about the Cheshire murders, or the Petit family murders. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and for subscribing to my channel, interacting, and all that good mess. I'm so excited. I recently got 1,500 subscribers. Amazing. And I couldn't be more proud. So thank you guys so much for everything. Before I dive into the story, I just want to let you guys know that I have tried to film this, or have filmed this 3 or 4 times, and there's always been some sort of technical error. I did my hair in each of them, and now this is the last time I did it, and again it didn't come through, so I'm going to shoot it from my computer camera instead of my camcorder and hope for the best. I'm going to give a little history on the Petit family themselves, as well as the 2 assailants, or 2 co-conspirators, the 2 co-defendants. The Petit family consisted of Dr. William Petit and his wife Jennifer Hawke-Petit, and their 2 girls, their 2 daughters, Hayley and Michaela Petit. Jennifer Petit was born September 26, 1958. She went to school to be a nurse. She ended up being the co-director of the health center at Cheshire Academy, which was a private boarding school therein. She met her husband at Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh, or Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, in 1985, and later that same year they ended up marrying. He was actually a 3rd-year medical student at the hospital, and she was a new oncology nurse. And Hayley came along. Their first daughter was born October the 15th, 1989, and she had just graduated Miss Porter School, and she played varsity sports like cross country, basketball. She was on the honor roll, actually given a school award for exceptional community service. Hayley planned to and was scheduled to attend Dartmouth College, where she planned to study medicine. Jennifer had been diagnosed with, the mother, had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and because of this, Hayley started a fundraiser called Hayley's Hope, and that was to fund for research for the disease. It wasn't just that her mother had been diagnosed, it was that she wanted to help others and try to come up with some cure or better treatment for the disease. The youngest daughter, Michaela, was born November 17th, 1995. Her big plan was, once her big sister Hayley moved off to college, she was going to take over Hayley's Hope and begin calling it Michaela's Miracle, and plan to fundraise for that, for continued research on multiple sclerosis. And Michaela's big thing that she enjoyed doing was cooking. She was cooking for her family, and she had actually done so the evening before the murders. Now, Dr. Petit, William Petit, he was the sole survivor of the home invasion and murders. He was an endocrinologist in Plainsville, and he was also the medical director in Joslin Diabetes Center at Connecticut's Central Hospital. Now let's talk about the perpetrators. These 2 lowlifes, their names are Stephen J. Hayes, and he was born May 30th, 1963, and he was born in Homestead, Florida. His very first conviction, he was convicted as an adult at age 16. He was paroled in 1982, and 7 weeks later he violated it, was back in the can. Hayes, at the time of his arrest for these murders, he had been arrested nearly 30 times. So he had plenty of opportunity to have been rehabilitated, and I think that's a good sign that he probably should never have been released. The most recent thing he got arrested for prior to the Cheshire murders was in 2004, he smashed in a car window with a rock and stole a woman's purse. There, from jail he was sent to, or prison, he was sent to Silliman Halfway House, and that's where he ends up meeting his co-conspirator. The co-conspirator was Joshua A. Komisarjevsky, Komisarjevsky, Anyway, he was born August 10th, 1980. So there's a big age gap between the 2. There's a 23-year age difference between these 2 people. So it's really odd that they would form any kind of bond or relationship. His mother was 16 years old, and the father, neither one of them were financially or felt like they were able to raise a child, bring them up, so he was adopted. He was adopted by Benedict and Jude, last name I can't say. in the early 1990s. Now, he was born, again, in 1980. In the early 1990s, Josh's sister accused her. And this did go to trial, and during the penalty phase of that trial, his father, adopted father, conceded that it was probably true, so he knew what kind of person he was. And can you imagine, as his biological daughter, or if that was an adopted daughter of his, if it was a real sister to Joshua, but regardless, he assaulted her and was convicted. His very first burglary he committed at age 14. So right away he's showing signs that something's just not right, and he starts his criminal activity at a young age. In 2002, he was arrested for 18 home invasions. Now, he was really ballsy with these home invasions. He actually didn't care who he broke in on. He would basically stalk his prey, and he would even break into state troopers' houses. He told his attorney that after robbing houses, he would go to the rooms where the occupants were sleeping and listen to them breathe, which is really creepy. It like makes it even worse. You would think that he would want to stay as far away from them as possible and try to have no interaction if he's just there to burglarize the place, but here he is sitting here listening to them breathing. Anyway, he said that he did this because he enjoyed the feeling of invading people's homes and violating their security. Yeah. Joshua was convicted of 12 counts of burglary, December 2002. Joshua was sentenced to 12 years in prison with 6 years of special parole. I'm not really sure what special parole is, but he should have been in prison for at least 9 years. During the sentencing, Judge James Benevegna, Bentivengna, anyway, described him as, quote, calculated, cold-blooded predator. Yes, clearly he was. Being paroled, though, in April 2007. Now, keep in mind, these murders take place July the 23rd, 2007. So just a few months after he's paroled, he commits these murders. There was a clear disconnect between the parole board and the prosecutors. Under Connecticut law, prosecutors were supposed to have sent the parole board transcripts of all the crimes that Joshua had committed, including the sexual assault of his sister, the 18 burglaries, and so on. Unfortunately, they weren't aware of these things. They weren't given these details, so they based it on his most recent robbery, and they did parole him. From there, Joshua goes also to the Silliman Halfway House and meets Stephen Hayes. The early morning of July 23rd, 2007 is when these murders took place. The crime itself is just unfathomable and completely uncalled for. So many things in this case should not have happened, didn't have to happen, and they also didn't have to be as egregious as they were. Stephen and Joshua both were at a point where they weren't going to be able to live in the Silliman house anymore because they continued to obtain employment, or they did not pass, or they flunked an alcohol and drug test. Either one of the two could cause them to be sent back to prison. Because of this, the two may have felt desperate, decided that they needed some quick money, and they just needed to do whatever to buy themselves some time or have fun. Whatever the case was, they conspired together to rob somebody. On Sunday, July the 22nd, 2007, 48-year-old Jennifer Pettit and Michaela Pettit, who was 11 at the time, went to a local grocery store, and they picked up food for a family dinner so that Michaela could cook for everyone. During the trip to the grocery store, Joshua notices Michaela and probably took a liking to her. He noticed them and he took interest. Then he followed them home. And there he sees, they live in this nice neighborhood. They've got, multiple cars. It's probably a good place to rob. He probably feels like he may have hit the jackpot. As he is seeing this, as he's seeing where they live and deciding that this is the home that they're going to burglarize, Stephen sends Joshua a text that read, "I'm chomping at the bit to get started. Need a margarita soon. We still on? Question mark. Joshua replies, yes. And then Hayes asks, soon, ? Joshua replies, I'm putting the kid to bed, hold your horses. Stephen replied, dude, the horses want to get loose, LOL. I think that can be interpreted as Joshua is watching the home. He hasn't left. He's stalking his prey. He's seeing, lights go out and that the mother is probably putting the children to bed. I believe Jennifer's sister said that she didn't have curtains or blinds and that you could easily see in the home. So he probably was just watching all this happen and getting excited about it, he and Stephen. Stephen and Joshua entered through an unlocked basement door, and they found leaning up against the staircase a baseball bat. They take it upstairs with them. As they enter the sunroom, they see Dr. Pettit asleep on the couch. The two claim that because they saw Dr. Pettit on the couch, that's why it took such an ugly turn. So they beat Dr. Pettit with the baseball bat at least 4 or 5 times, like the head and the body, and then bind Dr. Pettit's wrists and ankles with plastic zip ties and rope. Tell him, if you move, we're going to put 2 bullets in you. Then the two go upstairs where they find the children and their mother and bind them to their bed, bind their wrists and ankles to the bedpost and place pillowcases over their head. Now, they didn't kill them. I think they did that in an effort to keep them from maybe seeing or recognizing them. But after restraining them, Stephen and Joshua just ransacked the whole house. They're looking for cash. They've taken Dr. Pettit to the basement and they tied him to a support beam that's in the basement. And they continue to ransack the house, satisfied with what they found. They've not found any large sum of money, just some coins and odds and ends kind of things, but nothing big that they were hoping for. Then they found a check register for $40,000. For those of you who are not familiar with a check register, that is where responsible adults, instead of using the bank to tell you how much money you have in the bank, you would add in any deposits that you make and subtract any debits or checks that you use, thus coming up with a balance. $40,000 in this account, and they decide they're going to steal $15,000 of it. So they're not even going to take all of it, whatever. After finding this out, for whatever reason, there's surveillance video of Stephen going to the gas station and getting $10 worth of gasoline in 2 gas cans that he found at the house. Now, this is important because if he wasn't planning to kill anybody, if they didn't have intentions of killing anyone, why get the gasoline, right? If you were just going to rob the place and leave them bound and tied up, why do you need gasoline for? He gets back to the house and he takes Jennifer Pettit to the bank because he knows he can't withdraw the money. It's not like they can just withdraw a check. You can't go to the ATM and get out that much. They have to get her to do it. He takes Jennifer to the bank and has her withdraw this $15,000 from her bank account. While she's there, she tells the bank teller what's going on. And that bank teller immediately goes to her manager, and that manager calls 911. Transcript of that 911 call, and I'm going to just back and forth it. So the 911 operator, obviously, what's your emergency? The caller says, my name is Mary Lyons. I'm the banking center manager. We have a lady who is in our bank right now who says her husband and children are being held at their house. The people are in a car outside the bank. She is getting $15,000 to bring out to them. That if the police are told, they will kill her children and the husband. Her name is Jennifer Pettit, P-E-T-I-T. 911, is she still in the bank? Mary says, yes, she is. 911 says, okay, she's being held, or her husband, is what Mary says. 911 says, her husband and family are being held? Yes. 911 operator says, at their house? Mary says, yes, they're tied up. She said, they drove her here. I'm trying to look and see where she has gone. Wait, I see her walking now. She's petrified. So she leaves the bank. She does catch a brief glimpse of The gentleman, he is dressed in all black and has a cap on, so there's not really much of a description that she can get, but she does try to do her best to give all the information that she can to try to save this family. That call was made at 9:21. By 9:56, everyone except Dr. Pettit is going to be dead. So what happens in this short time period, right? It's just crazy. 911 call is made, and obviously Jennifer and Stephen go from the bank back to the house, and you would think that there would be enough time, travel time between this for the authorities to get there. Well, just as Jennifer and Stephen are pulling up to their house, so are the police. They just barely miss each other. Jennifer and Stephen go into the home where now they've got this money. They've got this $15,000. So Stephen in Jennifer, after he her, during the assault on Jennifer, Dr. Pettit actually hears this and yells something, and they hear him, and one of the guys yells down, "Don't worry, this will all be over soon." He got just a jolt of adrenaline, and manages to, and he was severely wounded. He was in the hospital for quite some time after being beaten in the head with a baseball bat. He makes his way crawling out of the basement. The house is surrounded by authorities that never called, never knocked on the doors, never busted in windows, never tried to do anything besides surround the house. Crawls up to one of his neighbors who sees him, who's, looking at all the commotion going on, and the police actually think that he might be one of the assailants. Find out that he's not, and he's like, "Go help my family, go help my family," to which they do nothing. The authorities still do nothing. While Jennifer and Stephen are going to the bank, Joshua, Michaela, poor little 11-year-old Michaela, and he actually didn't confess to this at first. He had poured bleach on her body and bleach on her clothes and stuff in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. It was not destroyed. During the autopsy, they did find that in her body and were able to match that to Joshua's, and he did eventually admit to it. Turns out Joshua is such a McNasty that he photographed the assault on his cell phone, and I'm talking about, these were horrendous photos. They were never published because she was underage, but authorities said that that is something that you will never forget and never want to see. Joshua, while they were gone, after they come back, Stephen, Jennifer, Kayla, and Hayley were tied to their beds, were bound to their beds, and they doused the girls' clothes, they doused their bedrooms in gasoline. Guys said they didn't, but it was later determined that there was accelerant on their clothes. They doused Jennifer's entire body in gasoline. Then the two of them set these fires and ran out of the house. When they ran out of the house, they actually ended up getting into a car accident with a police cruiser, apprehended immediately. But the house is on fire. Both of the girls died of smoke inhalation. Hayley had managed to escape her restraints and run out of her bedroom into the hallway, and she made it to the foot of the stairs. She collapsed and died due to the smoke inhalation. Her body was found there at the top of the staircase, and she had 3rd and 4th degree burns on her feet, just indicating that she had really gotten very close to the fire. Little Michaela, her dad, during a victim impact statement or during his testimony, said that Michaela had died surrounded by her stuffed animals. That should have been her safe haven in her bedrooms, on her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals in her home. Instead, it ended up being the scene of the most horrific crimes. Her little body was found half hanging on the bed, still bound to the bed, but her lower part of her body was slumped off the bed. She had been not completely burned, but she did have burn marks on her body. Authorities believe, the medical examiner believes, that she may have actually still been alive while she was burning, while the fire was going. This fire actually was only in a small portion of the house. so the house was not completely destroyed. Dr. Petit decided it would be better just to completely demolish the house, and he chose to use that land as kind of a memorial for his family. Stones and benches, and made it a really beautiful garden in honor of his children and wife. The thing that is ridiculous about this story is that the police had, from that time, the 911 call was made and they were dispatched that they could have saved this family. They did not knock on the door. They did not make phone calls to the home. They didn't knock out any windows. They didn't try to come in through the basement where the doctor had escaped from. They didn't attempt to do anything. They just had the house surrounded. These police officers, later it's found out, they were actually celebrated and received bonuses for the way they handled this case, which is insane. You didn't save anybody. You didn't try to save anybody. You surrounded the house. You thought the doctor was one of the people that was committing the crime. He tells you that he's not and asks you to go save his family, and you do nothing still. That's what's ludicrous about it. After these horrible crimes, after the funerals for his wife and children, he actually never returned to medicine. He decided to do good works in honor of his daughters and wife. He chose eventually to get into politics and is now one of the state representatives for Connecticut. Here's some other funky facts. One of the girl that was dating Joshua during this time, name was Caroline, and she in court read a letter from Joshua. And that letter said, "Dear Caroline, good evening, sweetheart. When I wake every morning, the sun is just starting to rise. Its light dances across your picture, radiating your beautiful eyes and pretty smile. It's the best part of the day, a calming mix of hope, peace, and tranquility. Take care, Caroline. Smile. Someone is thinking of you. Strength and honor. Sincerely, Joshua. P.S. Miss you." And she said, quote, "We called Joshua the hopeless romantic. That was the biggest side I loved about him. Joshua and I did have a very active relationship. She was underage. And he did like to tie me up. And of course, I was the submissive one. And sometimes I was the dominant one. But most of the time I was submissive. Joshua always asked me, 'Is this too tight? Are you okay?' Joshua was always concerned. Joshua was definitely a soulmate. And that's what killed me the most." That's what killed you the most, Carolyn? Not the fact that he's an 11-year-old, not the fact that he's his sister, not the fact that he helped 3 people. None of that bothered you? The fact that he was your soulmate killed you? No, you are sick in the head, just as sick as he is if that's what killed you about this whole thing. A counselor at Bierman Treatment Center that was treating Stephen, his name was Michael Dawes, D-A-L-U-Z. I don't know how to say that. Anyway, he went on tape through, I don't know which media outlet, but basically was just saying, "I wish people could have known him as I knew him. He was a very talented artist, and he wanted to get his life together and had plans for the future to be an architect and yada, yada, yada." Who cares? Who cares? A woman strangled her, poured gasoline on her body, pour gasoline everywhere else in the house, and set it on fire. Who cares what type of person he was to you? Everybody's got a little good. Some people got way more bad than good. But who cares at the time they did this? How could you have the audacity to even speak on what a good person he was? Seriously. Let's talk about the trials, okay? Let's talk about the trials. On September 13th, 2010, Stephen's trial begins. His attorney admits that he was involved, but that Joshua was the mastermind behind, the home invasion, and he was responsible for its escalating violent nature. Prosecutors obviously argued that both perpetrators were equally responsible. Once the trial was over, once the defense and prosecution rested, the jury deliberated for about 5 hours, and they reached a guilty verdict on October the 5th. The sentencing phase of the trial began October 18th, 2010. Jurors really had to decide if he should, be executed or be imprisoned for life, because at that time, capital punishment was applicable to this crime and could be imposed. On November the 5th, deliberations began. The defense attorney for Stephen was Thomas Ullman, and he told the jury that a life sentence would be worse than any other punishment. He said, quote, "Life in prison without the possibility of release is the harshest penalty. It is a fate worse than death. If you want to end his misery, put him to death. If you want him to suffer and carry that burden forever, the guilt, shame, and humiliation, sentence him to life without the possibility of release." November 8th, 2010, the jury returned with a recommendation that Hayes should be executed. Later in 2015, that was turned into life without the possibility of parole because the state decided to get rid of capital punishment. After Stephen's trial, Dr. Pettit made a statement saying, "We all know that God will be the final arbitrator, and I think the defendant faces far more serious punishments from the Lord than he can ever face from mankind." He also said Michaela was an 11-year-old girl tortured and killed in her own bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals. Hayley had a great future. She was a strong and courageous person, and Jennifer helped so many kids. December 2nd, 2010, Stephen actually apologized for the pain and suffering he had caused the Pettit family and added, quote, "Death for me will be a welcome relief, and I hope to bring some peace and comfort to those who I have hurt so much." Judge John Blue imposed 6 death sentences, one for each of the crimes, one for each of the capital charges, and he also sentenced him to 106 years for the other crimes Hayes had committed during the home invasion, including kidnapping, burglary, and assault. He said this, quote, "This is a terrible sentence, but is, in truth, a sentence you wrote for yourself in flames. May God have mercy on your soul." Fast forward almost a year, we go to Joshua Komisarjevsky's trial, which took place September 19th, 2011. Of course, his attorney blamed Stephen for the murders and argued that he was the criminal mastermind and that his poor little client was confused. He was an easily led man who did not intend to kill anyone. The jury gets this case and they find him guilty on October 13th, 2011. December 9th, 2011, the jury recommended the death penalty for him as well. And of course, that was overturned in August 2015 when they did away with the capital punishment. On January 27th, 2012, at the sentencing phase, Judge Blue said, quote, "This is a terrible sentence, but it's one you wrote for yourself with deeds of unimaginable horror and savagery." And this is what Joshua said during the sentencing hearing. He spoke about, the shame and disappointment and hurt that he'd caused. Then he said, quote, "I will never find peace within. My life will be a continuation of the hurt I caused. The clock is now ticking and I owe a debt I cannot repay." Then he also said, "Millions have judged me guilty of capital offenses I did not commit. I did not intend for those women to die. They were never supposed to lose their lives. I don't need 12 people to tell me that I'm guilty or not guilty of. None of them were there that morning. I know my responsibilities. I will bear them as I should. What I cannot do is claim responsibility for the actions of another." He also spoke about how the trial had affected him to become, quote, quite comfortable in the face of hatred and bigotry. He also said that the jury, quote, "believed me so worthless that my very existence is deemed intolerable." Dr. Pettit was able to give a victim impact statement as well. He described the crime as a personal holocaust and said, quote, "I have a difficult time sleeping and trusting anymore. I hope to continue to honor my family. I push forward in the hope that good will overcome evil." July 20th, 2012, the Judge Blue sentenced him to death, which, like I said, was overturned. While incarcerated, Joshua actually kept a diary. And in this diary, he actually called Dr. Pettit a coward and claims that he could have saved his family if he wanted to. He really, really had some freaking balls. Like, ridiculousness. If you enjoyed this story and want to see any of the documentaries or information available about this, I'm sure there is an endless supply. But Oprah Winfrey did a 1-hour special on the Petit family murders. Dateline NBC did a segment titled "The Family on Sorghum Mill Drive." HBO did a documentary by filmmaker David Hellbronner called "The Cheshire Murders." The one that I watched was People Magazine investigates whatever. I don't know if it was the Petit family murders or the Cheshire murders or what the title of it was, but oh my gosh, I recommend it. It does give me nightmares just because there was so much to it. There was the opportunity that the cops could have saved this family. The audacity of the police receiving a bonus and being praised for their work in this case. The heroism of the husband. There was the horrendous acts that were committed against Michaela and Jennifer, the fires, the potential burning alive, the fact that Joshua had stalked them the night before. There was just so many parts to this that's just like mind-blowing. Bank manager Mary tries to save them and did what should have been done. I mean, the fact that the police didn't take any step from that point forward is just, I hope that you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that, Dr. Petit has some sort of peace, in himself with this. I hope that Joshua and Steve, whatever, suffer for the rest of their lives and thereafter. I hope they repent for their sins, and I hope they truly get the help that they need while in prison. Hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for tuning in. Leave a comment down below so that we can interact if you have any questions or comments, or if you know anything more than what I said. Also, if you have any topics that you want to do a video or content on, leave that below as well. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe and share with others. You guys have a great rest of the week and an awesome weekend, and I will see you guys later. All right, bye you guys. Seriously, bye.